Today, my very, very special guest in the Aussie Legend DJs series, I have one of the people that I aspire to and have done for many years. And reading the resume today and looking at her actual 45-year career, I would like to take my hat off and welcome to Miss Legend, Lexie Bradfield from Sydney. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. That was a very, very esteemed introduction.
Listen, honestly, like I know that you, and we're going to talk about this in a sec, about I had first heard about you, and that's why I say you're definitely getting into the legendary DJ status. I had heard of you, the legend, who at 1979, underage, Lexie landed her first DJ job in Adelaide, the Cactus Patch and Mars Bar. And I definitely was way too young to be going out back then, but I had heard
I was
about
underage.
you.
Did I tell you that?
Yeah. Okay, that's all right. So you're about 10 years on me. But we won't talk about our age, will we? She had to wear a mask over her face and pretend she was a man. This she had to do for about a month before she could remove and morph into herself. As far as she knows, she was the first woman DJ to play in nightclubs. And after about 18 months, she returned to Sydney. Let's talk about before 1979. Obviously, how did you get into music and DJ? What was it that inspired you?
Well, my father was an entertainer. My
Yep.
mother was a yodeler. Believe it or not.
A yodeler?
Yeah, she made a record and everything, which I've sampled over the years.
That's gold. That's awesome.
And I just couldn't. I couldn't sing. I couldn't really do anything. When one night we went to the Tivoli bar.
No way, Tiv.
Sybil's, it was
Yes,
called. I
Sybil's,
still have the bottle of red wine. But anyway, it was Sybil's.
Oh, wow.
And a DJ that was playing there, his name was John Jones.
Yep.
And I was mesmerized by him. I just loved everything about, well, the actual night was fantastic, the people and everything. I mean, it was the gay night there. And
yep. So was it a gay night there at the Tiv at Sybil's?
At Tivoli, yeah. I don't know whether it was monthly or fortnightly. It could have been weekly. I don't remember, to be honest, but I just know that was my first gay nightclub I'd ever been into. Yep. And again, I was underage. And John Jones he was just this unbelievably cool guy.
Yeah.
Playing music and people just loving it, you know.
Can I ask here, was he mixing then, or was it like us? Most of the time, I don't even know who had the first Technics 1200s, but a lot of the DJ gear we had in the Mars Bar was all belt drive turntables. It was just, you know.
I remember.
Yeah. Would you remember that with him?
They were Denons, I think. Denons? Yeah, right. Anyway, look, I don't remember, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah. I just don't remember. But he was set up on the stage of the Tivoli back room. So it was all very mobile, I guess. But it didn't really matter because, I mean, I hadn't seen anything like that before. So I was unaware of whether he was mixing or not. You know, I just knew that from that point forward, I'm buying records. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been back in Adelaide that long because I grew up in Sydney.
Yep.
So I just started buying records.
Now, can I ask here again, where were you buying records from? Because when I started buying records, it was just at the local, you know, majors. But there was a guy called Soul Man in Gaze Arcade in Adelaide Arcade that was bringing over imports, and I believe he was the only person that was doing that. I wasn't sure if he'd been around very long because I was quite young when I discovered him.
Right. Well, I met a guy that came from Melbourne. He told me about a shop called Disco Oasis.
Mm-hmm.
And I phoned them one day and introduced myself, and they were doing imports. David Hiscock actually was one of the owners.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep. He's a name I know.
Yeah. He DJ'd up until his death, which was a few years back now. But he was one of the owners. But every time I phoned to put an order through, I could never get through. And I found out years later, because it was next door to Caulfield Sauna. So I couldn't get through. It was unbelievable.
I was in the sauna.
Yeah. And then not long after that, Joe from Central Station Records,
yes,
he opened a small Central Station in Melbourne.
Yep.
And I phoned and I spoke with him, told him where I was playing, what I was doing, and found out some prices, etc. And he used to pack, when he'd get a new shipment in, he'd pack up a box,
Yep,
send it down to me. I'd listen to them all, whatever I didn't want, pack back into the box with a check for what I did want and send it back to him. Awesome. And that's how he did business for a long time. Like he would just send me down a truckload of stuff and I'd listen to it and then figure out what I wanted to buy, and that's how he did it. Let's
talk about what you were playing back then. Can you remember any of the tracks? Can you remember?
Oh, sure, yeah. I remember. Yeah, I remember Mandalay.
Yep.
Candy Station, Donna Summer, of course.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Music in the Bush was it was Hot Summer Night was a big track.
Yes.
It was really like
we're talking 1979, so like we were in the 79s to 80s, there was such a transition between disco and commercial music.
Well, there wasn't any commercial dance music. That was the thing. Wasn't. There just wasn't. There was nothing being played on anything at all, not any airwave or video. Well, videos really hadn't sort of hit the market at that stage.
Yeah.
And I used to pray, it's like, we want dance music to cross over. And then when it finally did, many, many years later, I thought, I wish it hadn't. I wish it never crossed over.
I agree.
But, a lot of other stuff. I can't really. Those things are sort of the top of my head, but it was enough for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And then I made the big mistake of going home one night after I've had a big night at Mars Bar, and I left my music in the back seat of the car. Bloody Adelaide summers, they're very, very hot. And I lost half my music. They're all warped to buggery. I was just devastated. So it was a horrible, horrible thing, but it was a lesson learnt very early in the piece.
Absolutely. When you're talking records, they were like cumbersome, and they were like, you couldn't leave them anywhere. No. So let's talk about the scene back then. Like, I can only begin to imagine, because the Mars Bar and obviously other places at the Tivoli, they weren't weekly nights, were they? You sort of had to be in the loop.
Well, it didn't last that long after that. I mean, it was the only gay night in Adelaide at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is at the Tivoli.
Yeah.
Then Cactus Patch opened, which was downstairs of Mars Bar, but it was called Cactus Patch.
It was at the same place, wasn't it? At 120 Goodger Street.
Yeah. And then they moved. The Cactus Patch went upstairs.
Yeah.
And then that became a full-time restaurant. Like, everything was shut off from upstairs, and upstairs was just full-time nightclub.
Yep.
And it became the Mars Bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it all happened.
Yep.
Glenn Waller took over managing, because up until that point, Cactus Patch was men only.
Yep.
No women at all. And so then when it went upstairs, that's when, it opened up to women as well.
Is that why you had to wear the mask, because you were doing the men only nights? Or
Yeah,
right. Have you
got
the
mask?
To
wear it, but I had to wear it upstairs in Mars Bar as well. Wow. That's it there.
That is gold.
It's really, really like had it now, but that's it. It's the mask.
Wow. That's insane. And you know what? It's really funny, because when we discovered the Mars Bar, it wasn't the Mars Bar at the time. And I believe it was sometimes, now I don't know the dates, right, between when it closed down, or the upstairs closed down, and I started going out underage. The Mars Bar was actually a restaurant. And I had discovered.
Upstairs or downstairs?
Downstairs was the restaurant. And it was called Chicks Restaurant. And it was a stripper restaurant for heterosexual. So it was for men, like they'd go and have their business lunches and things like that.
Right,
and what had happened, did you know a lady called Judy Mack? A lesbian
The
called
name
Judy
sounds
Mack.
familiar. Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so she used to run some of the lesbian nights at some of the venues around Adelaide and just run random things. And she saw me on a dance floor and she saw me every week. No one knew who I was. I was 17 maybe. And she said, I'm opening up the old Mars bar. I think you should come and work for me. And I wasn't really DJing much at all. I was collecting records and that was my idea. But she opened up the Chicks restaurant every Friday night and Saturday night after the restaurant would close. So I would go down at 9 o'clock with her or go there straight after record shopping. We'd pack up the DJ box, which was in the middle, but wasn't a DJ box, where they had the cash register and all the ticketing and stuff. We'd push all that aside, chuck a thing decks on the top, and they built a thing to put the records over the top, and then it would open up as the Mars Bar. And then Glenn Waller came back with Ron Lucas and shunt Judy Mack out, and then they took over again. So
because they knew the owners.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so I worked with Glenn Waller and Ron Lucas for many, many, many years. And then
I loved Ron. I loved him.
Yeah, they were both.
And myself, we used to clash a lot, but Ron was just one of my faves.
Yeah, yeah. And then what had happened is they closed again. Don Storham, which is probably a name that you would know around the traps.
Yeah.
Okay, so he went into the Mars Bar and called it the Pleasure Club. And we as a group went over the road to 125 Goodger Street across the road upstairs, and that was called Reflections. And we ran that for quite some time. And then I think something happened to Don and they went back to the Mars Bar. And
wasn't John was running pubs when I was there.
Look, he was running the Pleasure Club. He was running another place, a recovery down on Curry Street upstairs.
Yeah, I remember the recovery place. Yeah,
the club downstairs. He was running everything everywhere. But he was always chasing the law, and the law.
Gareth Paul was running Cactus Patch, if I recall. Gareth Paul. Yeah. Well, actually, he was known in Adelaide as Gareth Pyle.
Okay. Yeah.
When he came to Sydney, he changed his name to Gareth Paul, but I knew. I knew what his name was.
Yeah, right. So in the end, the Mars Bar carried on. I left there in 1995 after about 13, 14 years. And then I actually went back and DJ'd there until off and on, once a month gigs. And I did my 20th anniversary there. And I was there the night it closed. I was the last DJ on. I played the last song, Donna Summer, Last Dance, and I took one of those goddamn mirror balls home, and I still have that. And the rest is history. Let's get back on. That's amazing. I'm glad I spoke to you today about the history of Adelaide, because that's starting to connect some dots. It really is. That's amazing. And to let you know that the reason why I got into the DJ box, there was a young DJ there called Glenn. And Glenn was quite young as well. And he was DJing. And when I first walked into the Mars Bar, my best friend from primary school was in the DJ box with a gentleman called Stephen Pace. And I couldn't believe it, because I'd not known Robin was married, and it was her husband, and he'd been DJing in the club. And I got to know them both. And then I got to know all the other DJs, and I used to be that person asking for songs and telling them I had records, and I used to pester them relentlessly. And then Glenn gave me an opportunity. He goes, oh, look, I need to go to the bathroom. Do you reckon you could, play a few songs? I'm like, yeah, easy. So he'd go off and do whatever boys do in the toilets in a gay club. And he'd come back half hour later. Oh, thanks for that. Excellent. And then every week, those gigs got longer and longer and longer.
So
then
you take your own music in for that to happen?
I was just playing what he had. And then
how hard is that? That's difficult.
Yeah. And then one night he'd gone missing, and the boss, and I don't even remember who was the boss at the time, they had come up to me and said, we've had to send Glenn home in a taxi. Do you think you can do the rest of the night? And I went, yeah, easy. And purely because this guy, and then eventually he got fired for unruly behavior, and I ended up getting his residency. But I had the nickname Josh, and Glenn Waller used to think I was a young, cute little boy.
Yeah, that'd be right.
Yeah, and so all the boys would go, who's that new DJ? And they'd go, Josh. I go, oh, he's pretty cute. So I got this reputation of being this new, cute little boy in the Mars Bar, but I wasn't. And that's how I got the job there. And I was really keen to hear your version, because back then, that's what it was like. Women were not known in the DJ box.
No. I just don't know of any other female DJ working in a nightclub in Adelaide.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't think there was one.
Yep.
But there was another DJ aside from Jeff. Jeff was DJing there.
Yes.
But there was another DJ, and I can't think of his name, but he used to play every single time he played, which was twice maybe over a weekend, the military two-step. I kid you not. In the end, people just got so over it, they ended up doing the military two-step along the bloody dance floor. So if anyone came from interstate, they would just be mortified because on would come this military, and everybody would race to the dance and then go around in a big square of the military two-step. It's like
no way. But you could only get away with that.
The nut bush.
I mean, what was your go-to track? What was your biggest hits back then? What was your big dance floor fillers? Or everyone used to fill the dance floor. I don't think there was ever a time when the dance floor was really empty back then.
No, they just, and considering most of the music that, I played you wouldn't hear it anywhere else.
Yeah.
The Hot Summer Night was probably the most commercial song I ever played. Oh, maybe a bit of Donna Summer, but
yeah.
They would just get up and dance. They were pretty good. And believe it or not, I never used to get too many requests, which was good. But then at that stage, I was all very welcoming, I'll accommodate anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
That was very early in the piece. I learnt fairly quickly after that, I have to say, about that.
Yeah.
But, it was a long time after I'd left Adelaide, it was a long time before I actually started to understand how to put the music together, because that in Adelaide I had no idea. I just did it, I just put track after track. It didn't matter whether it flowed or not. It was fun. That's what I was doing.
Absolutely. Yep. It was still the same for us later.
Sam used to be a DJ in Flo's Palace in Sydney.
Yeah.
He was a friend of Sylvia's.
I've heard that.
And he came down, he was in Adelaide for a little while. I think he was staying with Sylvia. And he came up to the DJ box with me one night, and I had 2 7-inch copies of Hot Summer Night, and we made it like 20 minutes long. Well, he did. He's sitting down and he's trying to show me how to mix music.
Yep.
And that was the first time I was actually introduced to mixing music.
Wow.
So from that point forward, it was like practice, practice, practice. Let's get another turntable. And of course, my first 2 turntables, they weren't 1200s. They were just like regular every day.
Did they have the pitch control in the front?
One of them didn't even have a pitch control. So it just had 45, 33.
They had odd ones in the Mars bar as well. When they didn't bring the double decker out with the belt drives underneath, they had 2 different turntables, and one had the switch on the front, and I believe the other one didn't have anything.
Oh, on the timber deck thing.
Yes. I
remember that. They used to have the 2 Denons up there. I think they were Denons.
Yep.
But they did have the buttons on the built into the timber bloody deck.
Yes, remember them?
And that was really difficult to mix music with those bloody buttons.
No, I wouldn't. And Lexie, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same decks that Ron
I'm sure
that you had played on. I'm pretty sure. In the 80s. Because I
think the mixer was like a realistic or something like that.
Oh, yeah, Citronic or something.
Oh, Citronic. Yeah, there you go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward 18 months. She returned to Sydney but didn't get back into DJing until 1985. And what happened there? You moved back to Sydney. Was there a reason that you moved back to Sydney?
No, not really. I was doing quite a lot of work in Adelaide. Then it branched out from Mars Bar. It branched out to different venues, and different clubs were opening up, closing down, opening up, closing down. So I was actually doing okay. But I think Sydney was calling me back. My whole family had moved back to Sydney by then. I was there, and I'd been up for a holiday. So I just thought, no, it's time for me to go back to Sydney. So I did, because when I came back to Adelaide, when I moved to Adelaide initially in 78, 79, whenever it was, I was straight out of school, hadn't finished 4th form, which is your year 3 or something.
Yeah.
Hadn't finished. I just started it and then moved. And so went straight into work, and I was wrapping meat in a butcher shop.
Yeah.
Before, and then that's when Mars Bar, Cactus Patch, all that came along after that. So I was straight out of school.
Yeah.
But anyway, after that 18 months or so, I just moved back to Sydney and started working daytime. And I got back into it. I can't remember. Oh, I remember now. There was a nightclub called The Playground.
Yep.
And Virginia Buckworth, it was a lesbian club.
Yep.
Because when I came back to Sydney, there was only one club operating. It was Ruby's, which, you know, it was licensed for like 62 or 68 people or something. And they used to put 300 in there. And Kimberly was the DJ there, and she was literally DJing out of a broom closet.
Yeah, right.
It was a broom closet.
Yeah, literally.
You know, and that's what they used to do. All different nightclubs that were just opening up around that time. They would put so much money into this, that, and the other, and then right at the end, they say, "Oh, where's the DJ going to be?"
Yeah.
Oh, in the broom closet or under the stairs or behind the car, or, you know, always this afterthought. And yet that was the crux of the club.
Yeah, that's correct. And they were always in these weird spaces, and they were dirty and they were uncomfortable, and you could never put anything. You couldn't be seen most of the time.
And you couldn't see the dance floor, and, you know, all those sorts of issues. There wasn't a monitor, and it was always an afterthought. It was probably an expensive part of the business, but it was an afterthought. Yeah. And eventually Virginia came around. She realised, you know, what she needed to do to change things around. She did. I give her that, because a lot of the places just didn't. They just said, "No, you deal with it. You want to work here, you deal with it." And you'd have to deal with it pretty much. Eventually that got better. That didn't really get better until about the mid-90s.
Yeah, right.
So that was a long time.
I agree, because we didn't even get Technics 1200s at all until the 90s, very early 90s.
Yeah.
We begged, and they didn't think it was something that was an investment that would work for the club.
And what an investment they were. I mean, still to this day, if you've got original 1200s, which I actually do.
I've got the 1979, I think, Mark II. Is that correct? Yeah,
Mark II, that's right, yeah. Mark II, Mark III, I can't remember. But they're the only things that have gone on mine are both the little lights.
Yeah.
You know, the little that you push down, the little light pops up.
Yep.
So both of those the bulbs have gone, but otherwise they're in perfect
condition.
Still
going. Yeah, same here. Yeah, same here.
And I can resell them now for more than what I paid for them.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, it was a pretty good investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the time between the sort of 70s and 80s where the gay scene was copping a bit of a walloping as well. You know, like there was a lot of things going down before the Mardi Gras party started. And let's be frank about it. There was all that drama happening between everything that happened before Mardi Gras in the 78ers. What was it like in those times, but sort of between sort of 1979 to 85?
I think I got back to Sydney in 1980, I think, something like that. And Mardi Gras parade kicked off. Sorry, that's some idiot outside. Started in Paddington Town Hall. Well, the party started in Paddington Town Hall. They hadn't got to the showgrounds at that stage. And they started at like 82, 83, something like that.
Yep.
I wasn't here that year when the 78ers went all that, but that would have been absolutely horrendous. And every time you hear anything about it, you can take it to the bank that it's true. I mean, the police used to raid the clubs frequently, and they weren't gentle about it. No. They weren't gentle about anything that they did, and they'd just come in, they'd pull the power. They wouldn't even bother waiting for you to because I was managing Ruby's at the time when they came through, and they just pulled the power off the main switch. Bang. Everybody out, and if anybody complained, they were thrown down the stairs, and there were a lot of stairs. It was like 40-something stairs thrown down the stairs. Ruby's used to be next door to a laundromat.
Oh, God.
And after every weekend, the class was always broke. That was funny. But Ruby's was one of these clubs. Dawn O'Donnell owned it.
Yep.
And it sort of opened and would trade and then close and then open back up again and trade and then close because Abe Saffron and Dawn owned the bottle shop underneath it. Right. It's now a sauna, so it's still actually, still around.
Is that next to Arc in Sydney?
No. It's down on Crown Street.
Right.
Across the road from the Columbian back a bit.
Yep.
I think the sauna's called Trade or something like that. It's sort of looks like roadwork signs and things. But that was where Ruby's was. And there was another club at Bondi Junction which had opened up and it was called The Peak, and that was doing really, really well. And then all of a sudden it got burnt down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard any of those stories or not.
The only reason why I know is, yes, I had heard the stories and seen them on the news quite regularly, but we also just watched the
Crocodile Dundee.
No. I've just watched the Netflix series about the Luna Park, burning down of Luna Park.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So they mention most of those burning downs of those buildings around those times. And what happened in the end, it was for getting people kicked out, re-renovating, and a certain person coming in. Watch the series if you can. It's a brilliant piece of Sydney history, and you see there's footage of some of the gay guys when they're rebuilding the club and putting it all back together, and they go, "Oh, do you know who burnt this down?" And they're going, "Yeah, we think we know." And
yeah.
So if you get an opportunity, watch it.
Because I will.
See some history there that you would.
Well, Dawn was a bit, she got blamed for a lot of things and a lot of, and look, I'm not going to say she's no longer with us anymore, so I'm not going to speak ill of the dead. But Dawn, she was Abe Saffron's partner. What else do you need me to say? There wasn't anything straight about Dawn, nothing at all, and her businesses were like this massive cobweb. That you just keep working around and around and you'd never get to the end,
Yep.
She was a very, very clever woman and ruthless.
They were back then.
Yep.
You had to be.
And you know what? She was right, though. She said to me, Lexie, she said, I really liked back in the day where they'd just come in and pull your power because then you knew where you stood.
Yeah,
she
exactly.
Said you'd know how much it would cost you to keep your power on.
Yep.
And that would go straight out the back door. And she said, and you knew how much it was going to cost you every single week.
Yep.
She said, now it's like the unknown and you could be closed for weeks waiting to get into court and all of that sort of thing.
Yep.
So she was kind of right in that sense, but that was definitely old school.
Yeah. Now, Abe Saffron obviously comes up in the Netflix series.
Yeah. Well, her other silent business partner between the three of them, his name was Roger Claude, who died, and his partner at the time was murdered, and his partner at the time was murdered also. So both of them were murdered just after Roger Claude's death. But Roger owned the Village Cinemas.
Okay.
And how I put two and two together that Roger was involved is because all of a sudden all of Dawn's venues got the same carpet as the Village Cinemas. I said, Dawn, where'd you get this carpet from? She said,
I bought it in bulk.
Off the back of a truck, Lexie, from Village Cinemas.
That's a cool story.
Well, she was very funny. Very sweet woman, but ruthless. You wouldn't want to be on the bad side of her.
No. And, that's what the nightclubbing industry was about a lot. I mean, I remember as much as great as DJing was, Lexie, there was this underbelly. And most often than not, it was either gay mafia, it was Italian mafia, it was biker mafia, it was police mafia. And there was so much money in the industry that was, being doctored and laundered and all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I saw some shit.
Because it was easy black money there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You didn't have to you didn't have to record anything. You didn't need anything on the books or anything like that.
Exactly.
It was easy black money.
And you got paid in cash and you didn't have an invoice book until I know now why in the 90s they started developing that thing called an ABN and all that crap that went with it because, dude, I was
still GST exempt.
I was the only DJ that was like, I said, I'm a little bit honest. I'm just going to actually start an invoice.
You and Kate Munro, you there, peas in a pod. She's going, GST or 10%. It's like, I don't charge.
And it wasn't even the GST. I was the only person in Mars Bar, only staff member, actually saying I'm making this money from the Mars Bar. And then all of a sudden the tax department's going, oh, okay, what's this all about? And then
the Mars Bar.
That's right. And then they got done for taxes, so they got investigated. So I hope that wasn't my fault.
Because usually these places were always owned by some name you've never heard of, and they were quite happy just to pay you like that. It suited them because it would just come out of the night's takings. You'd get paid on your way, and
that's how it worked. You just kept your mouth shut and kept going.
Said, and kids were happy to come in and work for $5 an hour.
Yes.
I know. Come and do it.
The DJ wage never went up from $30 an hour for many years, even right into the 2000s, mate.
It stayed at 30 for a long time.
I think we got it up to 50 at one point, and then it was a store.
And then it went to 75. And you know what? I still think there's venues around paying 75.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was 75 for years and years and years. And I figured, well, the only way I'm going to get out of this 75 thing is I have to negotiate my own money. Mm-hmm. If you didn't, you'd get $75 an hour. So there were some DJs that would just negotiate their own money, and eventually that's where I moved into.
Yeah,
because I just wasn't going to sit there and.
But we couldn't pay the rent. We had to have a job. I had to keep my job to work there. I went from a Hungry Jack's management job, which was rotation weekends, to a cleaning job with Hungry Jack's. So I could work Monday to Friday, to DJ Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And most of my wage that was made from my job went back into records. Like we were spending $400, $500, $600 a week.
Yeah, it's an expensive business.
Yes. And they didn't realize how much money we were investing into their club to keep it current. I don't know about you, but it was still, how much do we pay, to make this club keep going? We are the crutch of the business.
Well, that's it. Yeah, because, they would lease their lighting rigs and things like that. And they'd usually pour a bit of money into that. And they'd lease their sound, and that would be serviced by whatever company has put it in there, and that's all fine. But the DJs that came in and brought their own records and headphones, thank God they still supplied cartridges and stylers at that time. I mean, they don't now. They don't anywhere. You have to provide your own. And how many times have I left pairs of things in clubs? So many times.
Yeah.
So it was very expensive. And I remember a young girl who I spent the afternoon sort of trying to teach her the fundamentals in rupees. And she said, when do you start making money? I said, you're in the wrong bloody business, don't you?
No way.
When do you start making money? Oh, well. So, it was definitely mid to moving out into late 90s before money could actually be made.
Yeah. And
corporate was the best thing for making money. If you got to do corporate gigs, you'd make money.
Yeah.
And it was good money.
Yeah. Let's talk about the transition from Club DJ into Mardi Gras, because you are obviously probably one of the longest running DJs from the very beginning with Mardi Gras. What an absolutely awesome experience that must have been for you. I don't know about you, but my first gig, I got off that stand of the RHI from the midnight to 2 set, and I cried my freaking eyes out because it was that intense. Like, fuck me, excuse my French, but it was amazing. It must have been amazing for you.
Yeah, they look after you, Mardi Gras, don't they?
Yes, very much so.
Well, they used to. I'm not too sure these days, which we can touch on a bit later if you like, if we have time. Richard Cobden was the Mardi Gras president at this time, and I was running Oblivion at Black Market, which, as far as I'm concerned, was one of the best nightclubs we've ever had. And he would come. And Drag Trade opened up because we were doing once a month on Friday night, and Drag Trade took one of the other Friday nights, and he would come. He was a regular for Drag Trade, and I was always DJing for Drag Trade. And then he came to Oblivion, which was the girls' night. And from that point, he said, how about what about if we do a Mardi Gras? We're going to do it wasn't a Mardi Gras. It was Pride Legends of Dance. And we used the rat rig because the rat party was on the Saturday night, and it was all good to go on the Friday. So we did the party. They did the party on the Friday night.
Yep.
Using the rat rig, so it didn't cost them hardly anything.
Very smart.
And that was, my first party, and it was nerve-wracking, and then the DJ that was on before me came from Canberra.
Yep.
And he screwed up the second turntable. So I had one turntable to the left of me, the mixer, that's the turntable on the right, and then there was a third turntable, but it was right up, I had to have to run to it. So that's what I was doing. I was running between.
God.
My first gig in Hordern Pavilion.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah, I know. And I cried. I was crying because, things just weren't sort of going my way. In the end, I got a bit used to it and pulled off the gig. So I was happy at the end, I have to say. But, there was touch and go there for a little while.
Yeah, I've been in some situations like that, and it's really difficult. I don't think people realised, one time if your belt fell off the turntable, you're mid-set, and I had to put a cassette on. Luckily, there was a cassette player on, and I'd have a tape, and then you'd be like, fuck. And you're mid-set, and you got the platter off, and you're doing whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. So
and the earth wire's fallen out. It's like, shh.
Yeah.
I just used to carry a whole little bloody screwdriver and screw.
Yeah. And 5 cent and 10 cent coins to weight the needles down.
What was always that about? I could never figure that out. But in the end, I ended up using the bloody things. But I could never figure. It's like, why is this so heavy? But there you go. Yeah, a bit of blue tack from the 5 cent coin.
Exactly. So you played numerous Mardi Gras right through, didn't you? Over 10 years, wasn't it? Mm.
Well, yeah, because after the Pride party, there was Bent Over, I think. Or did that come second? One of the two. Bent Over was a Mardi Gras production, and that was in the Dome.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and played that, and there was only 3 DJs doing that. And that was like sensational. That went really, really well. So after that, from that point forward, it was like Mardi Gras. Okay, let's get you on a Mardi Gras. And, this is like a boys' domain here.
Oh, absolutely.
So they weren't overly happy to welcome me with open arms, I can tell you.
Mm.
I mean, some of them were okay, but a good deal of them, they weren't. And there weren't that many at the time. There were about half a dozen on each party, I guess. But not all of them were happy to see me.
I locked horns with a couple when I started playing Mardi Gras, and let me tell you, they went public in the paper. I've still got the clippings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I did a basketball stadium party once, and if they wanted to be hurtful, they could be very hurtful, and it was hurtful because you're a human being, and they don't have to continually bang on about whatever. And they, half the time they didn't even know what was going on, and it might not have been your fault or anything because things break live. Speakers fall out of the ceiling onto turntables. These things happen when you're playing live. There's nothing you can do about it.
No. I to around this time, because we had an interview with Kathy Adamek yesterday, who's doing a thesis on the history of dance music, and also we're keen to talk about to other female DJs about how far back we all started coming in, but we were never really promoted that much. We were, we had to work 10 times harder than everybody else to get where we're going. As the party grew, obviously it sounds like it went from one name to another name into different areas, and the Hordern and then the RHI. But I remember the 2 top tents, and I think the 2 top tents across the road when they had a women's tent and a men's tent. And I think, honestly, it was just before 1999 because I was already getting sets at Arc in Sydney, and I'm not sure when Arc opened. But
I can tell you a story about that.
Yeah, but someone dropped out at the last minute in the women's tent, and I think they got in contact with me through.
It could have been Tao, actually. I think Tao did. I don't think she made the party.
That's
somehow.
correct. And I played I think the peak set or the last set in the tent, in the women's tent. And I had them going absolutely spare because I was playing really high energy trance because I was playing mostly trance in the straight scene in Adelaide. And I was playing.
Then the music, everything had changed.
Yeah, it was starting to change from that really house music into trance and really high energy. And all the guys were coming to the back of the tent and opening up and going, can we come in? Can we come in?
It's never been segregated, ever.
But it was after that, I think they stopped it. I think I was in one of the last of the segregated tents.
Oh, they had DJ. They had Buck Naked, his name's Lloyd, playing in the toilets.
Yes.
The rig in the toilets.
With Trough-Man. Yeah. He was another legend. Both
yeah. Still alive.
Yeah. So how's that? So it must have been so interesting to see how over the years that you played, there was so many transitions and so many great DJs coming aboard. Let's talk about some of the DJs you played up against and with in your time. And now there's quite a few of them that aren't with us anymore, and that's a shame because the reason why I'm starting this series is people are starting to die off, whether that's of age or beyond their control. But Mandy Rollins, I remember of, as you said, there was also someone you mentioned in the beginning.
Oh, David Hiscock.
David Hiscock, amazing. What a legend.
Yeah, well, I think Ron Oram, he did White Parties and Mardi Gras, Dean Essing.
Yep.
Of course, there was Kimberly, Sue Spears, another one.
Yep.
There's been quite a few DJs. Paul Holden.
Yep.
He fell off a ladder. I mean, go figure. He fell off a ladder. And, there've been quite a lot of DJs that they didn't, I don't know if they're still with us or not because they'd move away.
Yeah.
And, if we're talking about AIDS, they would just move away. They'd move back to family or they were on their way out and, things like that. So you wouldn't know until you remember what happened to so-and-so. But, we lost a lot of DJs that way. But then a lot of survived because of the lifestyle.
That's correct.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, but the thing is now, some of them are really quite sick.
Yeah.
Because the medication that kept them alive is now playing all sorts of,
long-term effects.
They hadn't tested them long enough, and so on and so on and so on. But so all the medication that kept these guys alive through that horrible time has now come around and it's really biting them.
Biting them in the ass, yeah.
Let's
talk about, obviously there's a massive history with Mardi Gras, but did you find that once you started playing Mardi Gras, when the international people and all the people from interstate converged, you've got a very long list of gigs in New Zealand, overseas, Melbourne's a great one. A few of those names came up.
I've played, and even Perth. I did residencies in Perth.
Wow.
Connections mostly. The boys would bring me over, and they had me over there for a whole month once training DJ Curly and can't remember the other because what's his name, Nicholson.
Mm-hmm.
He was moving to London, so he was the resident there at Connections.
Yep.
And Curly was just coming up through the ranks, and there was another young boy. So I went over there for a whole month and just worked and trained them up a bit. But I think at the end, I asked them what they got out of it because usually I teach everybody the wrong things. They said, 1 in 3. We always remember 1 in 3, and that was me saying, you play with the crowd. It's like 1 for them, 2 for me. 1 in 3. So they remember. And that was pretty much what they remembered.
Wasn't it supposed to be 1 for you, 3 for them?
Oh, yeah, apparently, yeah. I never really worked it that way. Well, because I'd get really, and I would always find the most obscure mix.
Yeah.
I would play B-sides of everything pretty much.
Yeah.
Loved B-sides. And, Mogadonna would come running up to me. You've played the wrong side. Because they want to do numbers around the pool table,
Yeah, of course, yes. Good old Mogadonna. Oh, you're bringing up some names now. So what music, how would you describe your music format over the years? I mean, mine went from really
so many
commercial.
people have asked me this.
Yeah, and you know what? It's hard because we were there when music was being created, right? So all this new, music was being produced and it was getting better to mix with. We were getting more stuff from Europe, overseas. Even Australian people were remixing and bringing in all those DJ promos, exclusive mixes. Like, it was really hard to choose. How did you go? Because my influence, my early music influences was just with free media, radio, rock and roll, 80s music, Depeche Mode, But what was great is when I started DJing is they had, your Bizarre Love Triangle remixes, and you had your New Order 12-inch remixes. And I was really into the electronic sound, but also loved house music. But then there was this Euro element that came in, the Italia Euro house, and it was so exciting. And like me, I think as women, we're not so strict with our style. We could go from one style and another throughout the whole night.
You've just hit the nail on the head.
Because we're emotional. We play emotional.
Guys weren't like that, and they didn't play like that.
So men are very, men are technically good, but I found that they weren't emotionally good. And what set lines were, because I used to play 8 or 9 hours a night. Did you used to do that?
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah. I do 2 6-hour sets back to back. They went on for years.
That was standard. And then when they started shortening us and we had to play a 2-hour set, I'm going, whoa.
Ministry of Sound, 1 hour.
I know.
Everybody had 1 hour. It's like, what are you doing an hour? It takes me an hour just to calm down.
Warm up. You've got your 3 in 1 there.
So there was none of that going on.
12 records done. There's no one for you. They're all for me.
Yeah. The 90s was very good to us musically. It was the best time, and it was the best time to be alive, really. I mean, I've come through that now pretty much unscathed, which is kind of shocking, really. When I think about it, because I shouldn't have. But musically and party-wise, club-wise, it was the best time to be alive.
Yeah, it was.
And people were creative. They were just, AIDS hit. We came out through the other side. I mean, we lost a lot of people.
Yes, we did.
A lot of creative people, that had been around from the early days of, like, Simon Reptile and people, just very, very early days, really creative people.
Yeah.
And we lost all of them, and it just all became about dance. Yeah. And I like sawdust on my dance floor. I really, really do. But I kind of like stopping something and just having some spontaneous person doing something which is creative and interesting and fun. And that's what used to actually happen at the dance parties at Mardi Gras and Sleaze Ball.
Yep.
They would, all of a sudden, people would pop up and they'd be doing fire and things up on these bloody mountains of speakers.
Or they'd come down in hula hoops or something. It was synonymous with the parties. It was so random.
Never be allowed today. They would be closed down the minute somebody got to the top of the stack. They'd be pulling the power because they're just not allowed to do it anymore. I mean, I got a pyrotechnics license. I used to let off pyrotechnics inside the nightclubs. Bang, bang, bang. People would have singed hair, bloody poppers, and banging open bloody bags of confetti.
Oh my God, gone are the days.
Allowed today. And I mean, they wrote all of these laws after we'd been through